Mariam adjusted her hijab carefully in front of the mirror, making sure it was perfectly in place. She loved her hijab, not just because it was a part of her faith, but because it reminded her of who she was and the values she held dear. But living in a bustling city where modesty was often misunderstood, Mariam had faced her share of challenges. Every day on her way to the university, she felt the stares, the whispers, and sometimes even the snide comments. Yet, Mariam held her head high, her heart firm in her belief that her hijab was her crown. She was pursuing her dream of becoming a journalist, determined to be a voice for the voiceless. One rainy afternoon, Mariam found herself walking home after a long day of classes. The streets were almost deserted, and the sound of her footsteps echoed eerily. Suddenly, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. She turned to see a man, tall and dressed in dark clothes, following her. Her heart raced as she quickened her pace, clutching her bag tightly. The man called out, "Wait! Please!" Mariam hesitated, fear gripping her. What could he want? She glanced around, looking for anyone who could help. But the street was empty. She decided to trust her instincts and stopped, turning cautiously to face him. To her surprise, the man held up a small leather wallet. "You dropped this," he said, slightly out of breath. Mariam blinked, realizing it was indeed her wallet. She had no idea it had fallen from her bag. Relieved, she thanked him, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Jazakallah khair," she said, her heart calming down. The man nodded but seemed hesitant to leave. "You don't recognize me, do you?" he asked, a faint smile on his face. Mariam looked at him closely. His face seemed vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place him. He must have noticed her confusion, because he continued, "I was at the community event last month. You gave a speech about modesty and the power of the hijab. It was inspiring." Mariam's cheeks flushed. She hadn't thought anyone would remember her words, let alone a stranger on the street. "I didn't realize it made an impact," she said softly. The man nodded. "It did. You stood out. Not just because of your hijab, but because of how confidently you wore it. It's rare to see someone hold on to their values like that." It made me think. Before she could respond, he handed her a business card. "I run a media company. We've been looking for someone with your perspective to join our team. Think about it. I'd be honored to work with someone like you." Mariam stared at the card in shock. Was this real? She murmured her thanks as he walked away, leaving her standing in the rain, overwhelmed by what had just happened. That night, Mariam reflected on the day's events. The same hijab that drew stares and whispers had become the very thing that paved the way for her. She realized that her modesty wasn't just a shield. It was a light, guiding her to places she hadn't imagined.